Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is hear. Let's take a look at some of the definitions or ways that we use this verb. The first way the verb hear is used is to mean to perceive or become aware of sound or noises using one's ear. So perhaps you've had this situation where you're at home and all of a sudden there's maybe an odd noise, something that's different, right? You might ask a family member at home with you, do you hear that, right? So are you becoming aware of that particular noise? A second way the verb hear is used is to mean to listen or pay attention to someone or to something. A third way the verb hear gets used is very specific to our legal system here in the United States. So you might be aware of or read this verb being used to describe where a judge or a jury is listening to a particular case and deciding it. So here, the judge will hear this motion on this particular date. So they're going to consider this. They'll take arguments from two sets of lawyers and then make a decision. A fourth way the verb hear gets used is more specific to religion. So sometimes this means that a person is asking their deity, their God, to listen to and grant a prayer. And in fact, there are many prayers that maybe use a phrase, hear my prayers, right? And so they're kind of speaking and commanding, listen and make this happen. A fifth way you might encounter this verb being used is to mean to be told or informed of something. You should know that hear is an irregular verb. To make the progressive form of this verb, you can just add ing to form hearing. The past tense and participle forms of this verb have a unique spelling, so we're just adding the letter D to the end of it, but our vowel sound changes. And so we'll pronounce the past tense and the participle form heard. Heard. Okay? Now, there are a number of phrasal verbs connected to this particular verb, and so we are going to look more closely at those next in this video. The first you might encounter is to hear about. This means someone is learning about someone or about something, and generally we're talking about hearing it through word of mouth. So one person talks to or speaks to another person and shares some kind of information. An example of this might be, did you hear about our neighbor's son? So here's a simple past tense question. Sometimes this phrasal verb hear about is used as we kind of gossip and share information. So maybe there's something good that happened to the neighbor's son. Maybe it's something bad. But here someone wants to know, did you learn about some news connected to this person? The next phrasal verb you might encounter is to hear from. This can be used in a couple different ways. One would mean to receive some kind of call, a text, an email, a letter from a particular person. An example of this would be, have you heard from your aunt recently? Here's a present perfect question, and we're sort of wanting to know, has there been communication? Many times we use this, at least in my family, talking about other family members, kind of checking in. Have you heard from this person? A second way we can use hear from is to mean to reprimand someone. So in this particular usage, we're generally talking about something negative, right? So let's take a look at an example sentence. Your manager will be hearing from me. Okay, so you might imagine a customer who's very upset with something, right? And they're telling an employee, kind of, I'm going to complain to the manager. I'm going to let them know whatever happened today is not acceptable. A third way to use hear from is to mean to get feedback. Okay? An example of this might be, we'd love to hear from our past customers. Now, I think with the second hear from, I forgot to say, will be hearing is an example of the future progressive here. And my third example, we'd love to hear from our past customers. So we want feedback. How are you doing? How were our services? Or how was our product? Right? Here, I'm not actually using it as a verb. And I think it would be most common to hear it used in the infinitive. And so this is functioning like a noun. It's an activity in this particular sentence. Let's keep looking at some more phrasal verbs. Here's our second part. The next phrasal verb to discuss is to hear of. This can also have 3 different meanings. One would be to just be aware of someone or something's existence. An example of this might be, I had never heard of celiac disease before I was diagnosed with it. Here's an example of a past perfect sentence. I have had, and then I've got my participle. So this is a true statement for me. I have, and I've had, I should say, celiac disease for about 20 years now. And I didn't know this thing existed. So I'm one of those annoying people who cannot eat gluten, which is found in wheat and rye and barley. So it can make me very ill, as it does with other people who have this particular disease. I think there is greater awareness of this right now, but 20 years ago, it was not something that was being discussed a lot. A second way we can use hear of is to mean to receive news or updates about someone. An example of this might be, we've heard nothing of him since he left work last Wednesday. So here, we have heard nothing of him is saying we have not received any news or updates. This is also a present perfect example. The third way we can use hear of is to mean to refuse to accept something. Many times, the way you're going to see this used is in the negative. So let's take a look at our example sentence. I told my family I planned to stay at a hotel, but they wouldn't hear of it. Okay, maybe this has happened to you as you go to visit family. You say, oh, I'll get a hotel. I don't want to be in your way. And they go, oh, no, you must stay with us. Right? So they're refusing to accept this idea that you're going to pay for a hotel room. So many times you do hear wouldn't hear of it or will not hear of it. So you'll see those modals used in connection to this particular meaning of refusing to accept something. The next phrasal verb we'll discuss is hear out. This means that someone is listening to every word, every detail that someone else has to share. Many times, the way you hear this phrasal verb used is as an imperative, as a command. So, example here, hear me out. Okay? And then what comes next after this imperative is someone's going to explain their ideas. So I might be looking for a fight here with my example here, but hear me out, Ronaldo is a better player than Messi. And then likely what would happen is someone goes on and on about why they think Ronaldo is superior to Messi. Last phrasal verb we'll discuss today is to hear through. This means that someone is listening to the entirety of something. An example of this, let's hear her explanation through. So we're going to wait till the end, maybe until we ask questions or maybe disagree with something that's being shared. Now, let's spend a moment looking at some words and phrases related to our verb hear. The first word we're going to look at is the noun hearer. Hope you see that suffix er and immediately think of a person who, and then we can look back to the root word. So a person who hears or listens to someone or something. An example of this might be, encourage your team to be doers, not just hearers. Okay, so this might be a piece of advice being given to some kind of leader or manager to reinforce how they communicate with their staff, with their team. The next thing we're going to look at is a phrase, to hear oneself think. And this might seem kind of funny, right? Because we don't think of the action of thinking as being loud or noisy, but this particular phrase means that someone is saying, it is so loud, it's so noisy, I'm not able to think clearly. So an example of this might be, let's go outside, I can't hear myself think inside. So for whatever reason, too much noise, too much going on, and perhaps someone needs to solve or think more deeply about a particular issue. Another phrase you might hear is to never hear the end of it or to not hear the end of it. Both forms of this phrase are used to explain that someone is going to keep talking about something for a very long time. An example of how you might hear this. If she gets a better score on this test, I'll never hear the end of it. So here, someone's saying, oh my goodness, this person is always going to remind me they did better than me on this particular test. You might feel that way about games. Sometimes this comes up in sports of like, my friend will never let me forget that my team lost to hers or theirs. Okay. The last phrase we'll discuss today is to hear the last of it. What this means generally is that someone is going to hear about something for the very last time. And unfortunately, many times this phrase is used in the negative. So that's going to be my example here. We haven't heard the last of this air. So it means we're going to continue hearing about it. Might be for some time. It might not last as long as saying we'll never hear the end of this error we made or a mistake we made. But in the negative, it just means it's not the last time quite yet. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.